Okay, everybody, welcome to the podcast. We are joined by Dr. Logan Paul Gage. Dr. Gage, we've been connected on Facebook for a while. I'm really excited to finally get to sit down and have a conversation with you. I've read a lot of your work. It's all very interesting and good, and it's kind of generalist, right? You have different interests in epistemology and natural theology. So, looking forward to exploring these different themes with you today. So, yeah, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I've admired all that you're doing from afar. You're a master of many trades, and all the personal fitness and everything too. It's awesome.
Well, thank you very much. And I guess the best place to start this conversation is the beginning, since this is your first time on. Give us a little bit of your background, as whatever you want to tell us. But probably at some point we should, connect it to your work in philosophy. So yeah, please.
Yeah. So like you said, I'm interested in epistemology and natural theology. I did my master's and doctorate at Baylor University. I've been at Franciscan University of Steubenville this is going on, starting my 12th year now.
Great.
And I direct an online master's program in Catholic studies, which is it's really nice because it's kind of a lot of different things, catching people up on sort of seeing the world through Catholic eyes, but not just specializing only in philosophy or only in theology or only in literature. It's a kind of liberal arts degree that helps people sort of enter into the breadth of our tradition, which is really cool.
Yeah, excellent. So I think, all right, let's just dive into it, because you've done work on Newman and Newman's epistemology, and there's been some news recently that, at least for us Catholics, is pretty exciting. He's going to become a doctor of the church. So share your reaction to that, and then tell us what got you interested into Newman's thought in particular.
Yeah. This is big news. We've been, a group of scholars have been, submitting documents to the Vatican for over the last year and a half. We have this big positio, which is this sort of statement of support from all the other popes and all these quotations about Newman's importance, and then from scholars on different aspects of his work. And this was submitted to the dicastery for the causes of saints, and then for a vote for the full bishops. And this sort of got delayed when Pope Francis died. But yeah, this is exciting for us. I've been working on Newman for several years, and I guess I'm most interested in his epistemology because I just think it's a nice addition to Catholic discussions in epistemology.
Okay. Yeah.
Because a lot of times on the Thomistic side, which I really appreciate, but it's oftentimes a kind of like metaphysics of mind.
Right.
It's more about a third person perspective of mind world connection and how we can make sense of how our minds hook up to the world.
Right.
And but the questions I'm most interested in are more first person questions about, are my beliefs reasonable? How are my beliefs justified, if at all?
Yeah.
And Newman is going more after that, right? Because he's one of the most important Catholic thinkers after the modern turn, which I know, as Catholics we're all supposed to hate or something, but it's like, no, there were a lot of good things. There were kind of emphasis on interior experience and emphasis on the individual person. And then we start to get these first person questions about, are my beliefs reasonable? Do I have knowledge? That sort of thing. And Newman is addressing, just coming along after that turn. So he's so helpful for starting to address some of those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And in his epistemology in particular, what I find is a real sensitivity to kind of the range of human reasons that we have for our beliefs, where it isn't just, because sometimes we get this approach again oftentimes from Thomistic circles, where sometimes people just get it in their head that the Catholic view is that we just have to have like deductive arguments for everything or something.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, well, that just doesn't seem to me to be the way that the human mind works. We just gather information from all kinds of sources, and we tend to believe in its direction. And Newman has a cool theory about how we have something called the illative sense,
right?
Which sometimes he just thinks is just our faculty of reasoning in general, maybe not a special sense or faculty. But we have this cool ability to sum up a wide range of reasons rather immediately and intuitively when they overwhelmingly converge on a conclusion.
Right.
So it's not something you probably thought about today, but if I said, how do you know Ronald Reagan is president? Are you sure? And I'm like a Ronald Reagan skeptic or something. How do you know he was ever president or ever even existed? Like your mind is immediately incredulous. You're incredulous because you just know that like that's a crazy position to doubt that Ronald Reagan was ever president or that he existed.
Yeah.
But if I asked you to like prove it to me, it's like, yeah, give me your killer deductive argument. I mean, I can just start
I'll stumble around. Yeah, for sure.
Stumble around. Yeah. And the truth, but what Newman notices in our cases of certitude like that, it's not so much that we have too few reasons for our beliefs. It's that we have so many that they've all added up overwhelmingly, and it's really frustrating sometimes. But you don't necessarily have to Newman thinks you don't have to be able to articulate all your reasons.
Be super explicit about it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You don't even necessarily have to articulate all your reasons to yourself to be justified. It's just the having of good reasons for belief. And sometimes some people are more skilled than others in conveying their reasons to others. Yes. But that doesn't what makes your belief reasonable. Neither I nor Newman think, right? What makes your belief reasonable is just the having of good reasons for belief. So I find it's a very humane epistemology, and he's very sensitive to not only the range of human reasons, but the way our heart and our intellect sort of interact and sometimes affect the way we see, like our sort of heart and emotions affect the way we see the world. Right. And so it's just a very sensitive first person sort of epistemology, and he gets at a lot of what I'm interested in.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So much good stuff there. So I want to explore around in that, all of that with you. So, I mean, just me personally, I've always been interested and in some sense haunted by the problems of skepticism and stuff like that. And for me, a lot of that does sort of connect with a lot of the thoughts I have in epistemology, like some of my commitments there that might be driving cosmological arguments or stuff like that seem to me to be like minimal commitments I need to avoid really bad skeptical scenarios, right? Like certain causal principles or the principle of sufficient reason in a certain sense. So even though I haven't spent as much time directly in epistemology, it relates to concerns in epistemology that, sort of motivate some of what I'm saying in natural theology. And of course, everything should hang together, and what you say over here should have something to do with what is said over there as well. So with Newman, you classify him as a common sense epistemologist. So maybe we should talk about that a little bit, because I find this position helpful, and generally I understand it to be something like this. Hey, rather than take a position of sort of global methodical doubt when we're starting out, right, and try and find that little impervious nugget that can't be doubted, and then through a chain of just impervious steps, we reason up to other beliefs, right? And that seems to not be a very successful or promising project. The position, the epistemological posture instead is, hey, let's just trust not just ourselves. And I think this is an interesting development in epistemology as well, with like Zygzespy, right? But trust others too, right? If we're going to trust our own faculties, right, then we don't really have immediate reason not to trust other people's faculties, which means like we can start taking seriously like widespread beliefs, and we might even have good reason to take seriously widespread beliefs, even if we don't personally believe those things. For example, like belief in God or stuff like that. So is that right? Is that a proper classification?
Yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
you could build that out. Well, I know you say it is. I read your paper, right? But build it out for us, right? What is all involved in this common sense epistemology project?
Yeah. So I think the major commitment of this common sense approach to epistemology is just starting where we are, right? I mean, there's no other place to start anyway. We start with experience as it's given to us, and if in the end we're totally deceived by an evil demon or something, I mean, I don't know what exactly we're supposed to do about that. I think we have some reasons to doubt, some really good reasons actually to doubt the hypothesis. But yeah, philosophy in general just doesn't need to begin with a default skepticism. That seems a crazy principle that sort of just remains unjustified. I don't see any good argument for that. In philosophy generally, I'm just sort of an Aristotelian, and I just think methodologically we ought to start with what seems true to us. Start with doxa, start with the common opinion, and I think we ought to defend common sense insofar as we can. Now, I think we ought to feel nervous when we get to the edges and we're like, we don't want to just defend things to be dogmatic, but insofar as we can, we ought to defend ordinary beliefs in the material world and the world as it normally appears to us. Is it possible that skeptical scenarios are true? Sure, I don't want to rule them out from the beginning. I think Newman's very much in this tradition. And Newman says at one point, I'd rather begin with universal acceptance of everything than universal doubt. Like it just, the world just sort of But I think the main reason to start with, well, first of all, we're just naturally built. I think Thomas Reid points this out, right? Thomas Reid just points out that like we're built as children with a natural sense of credulity, and we naturally trust our parents and if we didn't, this would go really bad for us. I mean, we'd probably die, first of all. when they, parents say don't run out in the street, you just don't trust anything they say, or that they don't have any reasons for anything. And number two, you couldn't build up any knowledge, right? I mean, if you just, how do you start building unless you start to accept the things that seem true to you? And if we don't do that, we're already in skepticism. And so, so it's the natural stand of all humankind.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it's also principled. So the reason we ought to start with the world as it appears to us is because some things already seem true to you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how irrational would it be if you didn't believe the things that seem true to you? That's like the height of irrationality, is like believing the opposite of what appears true. So the world's giving you a bunch of appearances of, and they have that sort of felt veridicality. They feel true, right? I mean, when I look out my window and it seems to me that there's a tree there, it isn't just like it isn't the same as an imagining, because it has that felt force of something impressing itself on me that there's a reality.
Right.
And now, is it possible that I'm being deceived? There's a great hologram over there, or more exotic scenarios. Yeah, but it's hard to deny that I have a good reason to believe in the tree that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So I think it's just an a priori fact that these appearances of truth generate good reasons to believe things.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's just intuitive. I mean, what else? It'd be difficult for me to think that the world appearing to you a certain way doesn't give you any reason at all to believe it really is that way. That would be crazy. So, so first of all, we're built this way by default, but I think we can say more than that. Rationally, it'd be really strange. It'd be irrational, I think, not to at least give some credence to the way the world seems to you, right? And so, and then from there, I think we can build up beliefs about the world, and we can revise them as we go. What I find is that skepticism is mostly built. I think almost all of the classical arguments for skepticism just presume some things about knowledge that I don't think we have any good reason to accept, namely a kind of infallibilism about knowledge. That if you know something, then there's like zero possibility. You have zero possibility of erring.
Sure.
Like, in order to know, you have to have absolutely conclusive reasons with zero possibility for error. Not zero error, of course, but zero possibility for error. And I just think that sets the standards for knowledge way too high, and it rigs the game from the beginning. And of course, if that's true, we don't know very much.
Yes.
I mean, how many things do you know that couldn't even possibly be mistaken? It wouldn't be very much.
Right. Yeah. Conceptually, right. Not a whole lot, for sure. Yeah. Like I do think that's an important distinction. Like metaphysically, I think it is impossible that we're, brains in vats, for example, or something like that, right? But it seems like a conceptual possibility, right? So I could be wrong. But
what do you mean by metaphysically impossible?
Well, I guess this relates to another question that I wanted to ask about Newman's epistemology. Is it does seem like, I'll try to answer my question and answer your question and me asking one. That you need some sort of like essentialism, right? It's like a nature-based epistemology, right? And to me, like, if you're an essentialist and you think that things have natures, then that means that things also have, hidden a posteriori necessities, right? Like there's necessary overflow conditions and constraints on things that should actually make us pretty radical modal skeptics. I think, like, just because we think things are possible, like I could be a brain in a vat, like, no, there could be all sorts of hidden constraints here. And I think there are, to think that that's actually metaphysically impossible, even though it seems conceptually possible. So what I would say is conceivability, imagination are actually pretty poor guides to possibility, at least in far out scenarios. So like if a certain essentialism is true, especially about the nature of the human intellect and will and what we are, then I think that actually means that these sorts of scenarios are not possible. Can I prove that that's the case? No, but I think that there's good reason to think that they might very well be metaphysically impossible, or at least we should not think that they're seriously possible, aside from the fact that we can imagine them, right? So that would be my thought in that direction. And that, like, James Ross is somebody who defends that thesis. But then that relates to my question for you is like, okay, well, do we need sort of an essentialism in the background for what Newman's up to? You think his is a nature-based epistemology at the end of the day? You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah. A couple of things there. Number one, I share some of those intuitions, although I guess I don't, the thought I immediately have is, why not just say that it sounds to me like what you're saying is like, if we know what human persons are, then we cannot be brains and vats, because that would deny certain essential features of humanity. But then it still seems possible to me that we could just be mistaken about the nature of humanity in that sense, right?
Yeah, I think I want to leave that open. I want to say that just because we can imagine, like, if you could actually get an actual,
or mistaken that we are human, in other words.
Yeah, that you could, if you could. So I don't think we are particularly in a position to definitively settle that, but I think that there are good metaphysical reasons and possibilities to be very skeptical of that possibility. That's what I want to say. I think.
Got it.
We're
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then I think, like, well, because sometimes people will worry, well, how do we know what's possible at all? And I think that's easy. We just look around and see what people and natures have already done, right? Like, just locally, right? Like, I think, like, if you could actually construct, like, if you could show me a brain in a vat, right, or something like that, you've actually done this in the actual world or whatever, then I would be more open to it. But we don't have those.
I would want to divide the possibility space up, though, between like what's naturally possible given our physical laws of nature and so forth, which are themselves contingent, but in this world seem to be fixed. They have a sort of natural necessity, you might say, even though they're not absolutely necessary. And then I would say there's metaphysical necessity sort of above that, of things that could be, different in different worlds, in
a different universe, a God created or something like
that.
Right?
That's how I would typically think about that. Yeah, and then logical necessity of things that just couldn't even be possible, and different in any other world. Newman's not good. Newman's not good on metaphysics at all. And he's more just brought up in this British empiricist tradition, and I think left to his own devices, he actually would have been some kind of idealist or something. I think he sort of indicates he's not good on natures, but he does. But I will say that even despite his specific views on those things, which aren't very developed at all, I don't know that he's just presuming stable natures or anything, but there is in this default trust sort of built into humanity. And there's just I don't know if it's quite an assumption as though it's like a necessary part of any of his arguments, but he just thinks there's a way that we're built. In fact, part of what he's chiding, he's in this dialectic back and forth with John Locke. And part of what he chides Locke for is not being a very good empiricist, which is kind of funny because when Locke comes to set the standards for knowledge and certitude, Locke just decides sort of a priori that the only way we can get knowledge and certitude is through direct rational intuition or demonstration. But then Newman points out, but that's just not true. Humans are as certain as they can be of all kinds of propositions that are neither directly intuited nor demonstrated. And in fact, he calls out Locke, because Locke has this passage where he's like, well, some things come so close to that standard that we can just kind of count them as, and it's like, it's like Locke has this totally a priori epistemology, which is sort of beautiful in itself. But Newman just points out that's not the way humans naturally work. So Newman is paying a lot more attention to human nature and how we work. But I also think he's doing more than just descriptive psychology. He also thinks it's normative, and he just thinks we have no good reason to accept Locke's super high standards for knowledge and certitude. It's not the way we actually behave. And in fact, Newman's thinking of propositions like that someday I will die, or that Great Britain is an island. He's like, guys, we're as certain of that as always we're basically anything except for what, like the principle of non-contradiction or something. And we would defend it come, hell or high water. And so it's just a fact that somehow we're able to become super, super, super duper certain and have knowledge of these propositions, which just even can't in principle be demonstrated. And so there is a certain reliance on human nature, on our sort of powers. But it's never really made super explicit, except as a kind of default trust in human nature, and we ought to trust it till we have some good reason not to.
So it sounds like, even though he might not have pursued that line of thought, it sounds like you probably need some sort of essentialist metaphysics, maybe to shore that whole thing up, which that's fine. I think that's right anyway, so that's not like a cost to me. Might be to other people. So, all right, let's maybe a little compare and contrast would be helpful, because all right, so we've got Newman, and there's some other interesting schools of thought in epistemology. I know you've spoken about these before. You've got phenomenal conservatism, and you have proper functionalism. So I'd like to get your thoughts on maybe how Newman is compatible or is saying a lot of the same things as some of these guys, and maybe how he differs, how he's incompatible. Proper functionalism is easy. I talk about it a lot, and because I talk about it a lot, I think people think that I endorse it. I actually don't fully. I would say I incline much more towards an Aristotelian epistemology. That's and there's compatibility there, but I'm like a Aristotle guy, through and through. And but I think what Plantinga says for proper functionalism, is echoing a lot of what you've already said. That we do start in a default trust of that we have these lots of beliefs that are just occasioned in us. And what Plantinga is doing, I think actually this is a good way to maybe distinguish what you brought up before between a lot of contemporary epistemology versus what Thomists are doing. Thomists are kind of like interested in asking, like, what is knowledge? What is its nature, right? Whereas a lot of contemporary epistemology, like Plantinga, are saying, well, what are the conditions of knowledge, right? Like when can we say we have knowledge? And he lays out this set, right, that we have knowledge when a certain belief is occasioned according to faculties that are functioning properly, generally aimed at truth, with a high objective probability of getting it, working in an environment, and then a million qualifications, right? It has to be like there's mini versus maxi, and it gets very complicated, right? But he takes these things into consideration of like weird environment scenarios. Stick seems wavy. Lots of people were wrong about the sun and the earth and what's moving in relation to it. So he's thinking about all that. So maybe start there. Tell us your thoughts about proper functionalism.
Yeah.
How close is Newman to that? What are the differences? What do you like? What do you not like? Anywhere you want to take it. Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for that. So my particular theory of justification is often called phenomenal conservatism.
Okay, so that is your camp. You like that?
But think of that as a specific subset of evidentialism, and just the idea that we need to have good reasons for our beliefs, and for them to be justified, and then that would be a condition on knowledge and a kind of a constraint on knowledge. That you don't have knowledge of things that you don't have any good reason to believe. That seems pretty common sense to me. Yeah. I'm never going to be knocked off of that one. I mean, I remember the heady days of the 90s, right? When I was in high school and going into college.
The 90s, Furbies,
it was
and
like
whatnot,
we had Plantinga, we had Bill Alston, and I was, back then I was Protestant too, and so it was like, man, we got all these killer philosophers, and I just kind of thought proper functionalism just must be like Christian epistemology.
Yeah.
Because that's what all the cool guys, and by the way, they are super cool. They're super smart dudes. The people I still admire a lot. The ones that some of them have passed too. But here's what never sat well with me about their theory. I just can't shake the belief that in order to know stuff, we got to have good reasons for what we believe. That just seems like total common sense to me. And like I said, methodologically, I want to just defend what seems like common sense across times and places and cultures until I can't anymore, or until I feel that deep tension of I'm being unreasonable or something like that. And specifically, I'll tell you what bothers me most about the proper functionalist theory. Well, obviously, the thing that bothers me most is there's no evidential condition.
Sure.
So on Plantinga's theory, it's just an input-output functional mechanism where the idea is that God or nature has built you with a design plan, and so there are kind of conditions of your proper functioning, and as long as you believe the things that you are sort of triggered to believe according to this functionalist one-for-one design plan of inputs and outputs, so when you see a pretty sunset, maybe it triggers God beliefs or whatever. You as long as you're doing that, the idea is that you're fully within your epistemic rights to believe in God's existence. You get
that little sprinkle of warrant on there, right? Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think that's crazy and like disproven by counterexamples. So what I argue in my dissertation is it becomes more clear. Now, here's what I think the trick is going on here is that sounds really reasonable because there's actually an intrinsic connections between pretty sunsets and God's existence. There's like an intrinsic rational connection between the input and the output. But what bothers me about Plantinga's theory is that it doesn't require any rational connection between the input experience and the output belief. So on this theory, it could equally be rational for you to believe in God's existence upon seeing like yard kitsch, like those pink flamingos that people used to stick in their yards, from the 1950s or 60s or whatever it was. Anytime you see those, it turns out, according to your design plan, you immediately triggers God beliefs. On that view, that's equally rational.
Yeah.
And I just think that's crazy, because yard kitsch bears no intrinsic rational connection that's immediately obvious to me to God's existence. Or maybe every time you step in dog poo, boom, it triggers God beliefs or something.
Sure.
I just think that's crazy. So what it shows to me is that there's a constraint here that we need to obey, a rationality constraint, which is that the experiences that give rise to our beliefs have to bear some rational, intrinsic, evidential connection to those beliefs. And so what Plantinga's theory is arising out of previous theories of like the causal theory and reliabilism. Yes. And those ones, by the way, were specifically trying to get rid of normativity in epistemology, because it's a problem for naturalism. Yeah. I mean, these guys were like, we're all naturalists. What are we doing talking about all this weird normativity as though God built it into the world or something? Yeah. And so that's where Goldman starts to say, what if knowledge is just true belief that's just like caused in the right way? Yeah. And so that's where we get the justification or the internal condition on knowledge. We get it eliminated. Yes. And then he realizes that doesn't work because there's a bunch of counterexamples. He proffers reliabilism. And Plantinga explicitly says that his view is a development basically of reliabilism. Yeah, and it's externalist. I know we wanted to talk about the difference between internal, but keep on your thought and then we can circle back to that. To me, it's getting rid of the normativity there. It's getting rid of the thing that I think as theists we have no reason to want to get rid of, which is that there's a normativity to rationality, and that it consists in having good reasons for our beliefs. Yeah. So what? Real quick, here's a question. So, like, what? I'm just trying to again. I'm not in this school of thought, but I want to try and give it a fair shake. And I do read a lot of them, right? I try to read as many people as I can, even if I don't totally sign on to their project, right? I mean, Plantinga ultimately says that his proper functionalism doesn't work with naturalism, right? That's like his big spiel, right? And he's like, yeah, you really kind of do need theism for this. So might he just try and push those rational connections again, extrinsic? Like, well, God isn't going to have your belief triggered when you step in poop, right? Because God knows there's no rational connection there, right? Would that alleviate some of this current concern for you, even if it restricts the metaphysical space that PF could operate in? Does that make sense? Yeah, well, it still would bother me, because it seems that there's no reason, if the subject isn't aware at any level of the rational connection, then from their own perspective, it's a completely arbitrary belief, and it seems no better than like a stray hunch. So that would improve things, because at least there would be some kind of connection. Just not immediately available to us, right? Yeah. But it seems to me that but for you to be rational to believe something, it seems to me that you need to be at some level aware of some sort of reason to believe that thing. Right. Otherwise, you're just sort of going around believing. And now I wouldn't blame you. You're not blameworthy. You're just doing whatever God programmed you to do. Right. But that isn't the same as being rational. I mean, God has programmed all kinds of things, rocks to fall or whatever. It doesn't make them rational. So, So it still seems like a causal connection, not a rational connection. Yeah, no, that's good. That's a very important point. Yeah, right. Good. Yeah. Is there any response from proper functionalists on that point that you think are? Yeah, I think the best response I've heard is something like, well, you're just interested in a different sort of value. Knowledge doesn't require that kind of connection. But I don't know. Everyone always has thought that it has, all the way back to Plato. I don't bite the bullet on it. Yeah, sure, right. Like the whole history of philosophy is on my side. I don't know what else to say if you have different intuitions. I mean, it is. Plato is like, hey, belief plus like some account, right? That's some rational account. Yeah, some account, right? Totally. Yeah, and it's like that seems right to me, and it seemed right to everyone until the 1960s. So things got weird in the 60s, as you know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So now the thing I appreciate about the theory, though, and I think the reason I was attracted to it in the 90s was that it has a really good answer to how sort of like the grandparent in the pew is like rational in holding their religious beliefs. Yeah. But it seemed to me that it's an over response to classical, foundationalism or evidentialism. It's a kind of over response to Descartes in this idea of like, we need to sort of be able to like rationally prove everything.
Yeah, it goes too
and
far. You don't have to rationally prove anything, right?
Yeah. But to me, it's a total like 180 over response. Like, yeah, we don't. And it also has a beautiful quality of like sticking it to the naturalist that is kind of fun, you know, that you might revel in, where you're like, oh yeah, I don't even need arguments, you know?
It is fun. But here's the thing, and I'll throw this out there because like I've teased, you know, proper functionalists about this before, and a lot of them don't think it's a problem. I kind of do. Is that, and like Plantinga acknowledges this in two places. He's got a paper called Divine Knowledge, and he's got a footnote, I think, in Warren or Proper Function somewhere. And it's essentially this, right? It's like, look, if you need proper functionalism to work, right, and for us to have an account of knowledge, like it already requires like some entity that knows a lot of things, like how to set up these environments and all the causal that. But my account of knowledge, the conditions of it, can't apply to that entity, obviously, God, right? So like whatever else you want to say about the conditions of knowledge, like this cannot be a universal account, and you're going to need like to say something about God to make sure that like whatever these skeptical scenarios that you're trying to avoid don't like get placed right back up at the meta level. And he like kind of gesture, like it's funny because he'll attack Aquinas a lot of times, like on divine simplicity, but then like this is the one time he's like, well, Aquinas says something about knowledge being analogous and, you know, God being identical. It's like, well, hold on, man, you can't, you know, take something back that you just threw in the garbage can, right? And I agree. Like I think divine simplicity is like a beautiful like account of the ultimate form of knowledge, if you will, right?
Yeah.
But like to me, like that's not available to Plantinga. But he just kind of like gestures in that direction, and then like I guess doesn't think it's a major concern. I always thought it was something that deserved a lot more thought, but I can't find too many, and maybe I just haven't looked hard enough. I can't find too many people trying to address the divine epistemology issue on proper functionalism. Maybe you have some thoughts.
When you said that, I thought, that's exactly what he needs, and yet he doesn't seem to like divine simplicity and stuff. But it just seemed to me that it's an overreaction to when the skeptic sets the evidential standards so high that like none of us can meet them, including like for religious beliefs. Like I seem to be the proper response was not to be like, to heck with your evidentialism. It would have been like, wait a minute, that's not a reasonable standard. That's not the standard we all use in everyday life for everything. Why are you imposing too great of a standard on religious beliefs that can't be met by your ordinary, you know, object level beliefs about the world or whatever? Why you believe in trees? So it seems to me that the proper response was just kind of a more moderate evidentialism, where we have just like normal humane standards for what counts as a good enough reason to believe things. If it turns out we can't demonstrate everything, I don't think that means we should give up on the needing like the on the fact that we need reasons for our beliefs to be reasonable.
Yeah, good. Okay, no, that's very sensible. All right, now let's talk more about PC. I'm going to stop trying to say phenomenal conservatism because my tongue, I got it right that time, but usually my tongue like gets twisted in knots when I say that. So, all right, so what is this? And obviously you're partial to both Newman's thought and PC, so you probably think they're pretty compatible. Talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and Newman doesn't have any specific account like PC, but I do think that he's like I said, in this common sense mold. So phenomenal conservatism just says that, you know, the appearances or the seemings from the world, the way the world seems to us, generates reasons to believe things, right? And again, I think that's just a principle of rationality. I just think that that's if you have an indication that P is true, therefore you have some reason to believe P is true, and therefore some kind of degree of reasonableness or justification to believe that P is true. Now, if something only seems really weakly true to you, like you think you see a friend in the distance a little bit, that might not be enough to believe that it is your friend with like a super high degree of confidence or something. But it's still some indication, some reason in favor of your friend, you know, really being over there. And so PC is just a principle of justification, and it's a sort of evidentialist principle. And the reason is because it's sort of presuming that evidence consists in these appearances of the world that philosophers also often call seemings. Just because we don't have a better name for it. And I know that sounds weird and new.
So creative, yeah.
Yeah, I know it sounds weird and new to many people, but again, all we're talking about is like the appearances from the world, the way the world seems to you to actually be. that gets more complicated, and we could talk about that. But it seems like when we believe things, if you think about why you believe anything, like in the tree that I'm seeing right now, I believe in it because there's some sort of appearance I at least seem to be, receiving from the world, and so I think I'm rational in believing in the direction of my experience. So these seemings are just like experiences that we have where things seem true to us. And so it's kind of a further specification of this more general idea that we need reasons to be justified or to hold reasonable beliefs. And
Right.
it ties back in a little bit to what we're talking about with planning go, where it seems to me we need some sort of principle like this. Because if you remember one of the main things I really don't like about Plantinga's theory is there's no tie between the experience and the output belief. And this is one that really nicely ties together the content of the experience and the content of the belief. So the principle says, if it seems to you that P, where P is some proposition, like there's a tree, then you're to some degree justified in believing in the exact same content, the exact same proposition. So it's a nice, what I call conservative principles in epistemology tie together the content of your experience with a rational output belief in a really nice way.
Yeah, good. Is that something you think a proper functionalist could adopt? Or if they could, then would you just say, well, you don't really need proper functionalism anymore? Or do you think that there's...
I'd probably say that the latter part. But no, I think they could easily adopt it. But again, it's not going to be part of their account of knowledge because they've excluded that whole justification criterion for knowledge. They think you can have knowledge just by having the right experience and adopting the connected belief from your design plan, even though you're not aware at any experiential level necessarily of good reasons to believe the target proposition.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. I know we wanted to just talk at least briefly about internalism versus externalism. So yeah, proper functionalism, externalist. You're not a fan of that. So talk to us about this distinction, why it's important, what the consequences are, and where you fall, I guess. Right.
Yeah. And so I think the difference here is primarily about whether any sort of internal awareness at all, at any level, more explicit or perhaps more implicit, is a necessary condition on knowledge. Like, in order to know something, do you need to be aware that there's something going in favor of the truth of your belief? Or is it enough to just be like sort of programmed to naturally believe it, or maybe just using some process that you're not at all aware of? Maybe you're not aware of any reasons, but you're sort of just designed through certain brain processes to spit out these kinds of beliefs. The externalist thinks you don't need any sort of internal awareness of good reasons to believe a proposition in order to know that proposition.
Right.
I think that's super counterintuitive. So the first thing I would say is, as a default, and I think the whole history of epistemology bears this out, like as a default, you should think, I mean, we expect good reasons for people. Like, if somebody says something in a party, you're like, what do you expect from them? You expect some sort of account, some sort of reason as to why they believe that, the government's being run by pedophilic space aliens or whatever, we need some sort of reason. I mean, you can't just say
that belief was just occasioned in me.
You can't say that. That's not good enough. Now, again, we might not blame you if you're like programmed just to spit out some random belief or something. But that's different than saying that you've met the bar of rationality, where we want to have good reasons for the things we believe. And so first of all, I just say, just as a matter, I know like burden of proof argument for losers, but like as a matter of fact, I guess think like the default is people have always thought there's some sort of internal rationality requirement on knowledge. And so I think that's a default, unless they give us a really, really good reason to think that knowledge doesn't require some sort of awareness. Now, the typical argument for Plantinga and everybody was that we ought to abandon that whole evidentialist paradigm because it was too demanding, which I agree with them. I mean, but they were pointing to people that set the standards for evidentialism so high that none of us can meet it anyway.
Right.
So it seems to me that there is an internal condition. Where Newman ties in really nicely here is that Newman, going all the way back to his like Oxford University sermons in the 1830s, makes a clear distinction between implicit and explicit reasoning. That we very often reason under the surface, where our mind is gathering reasons and sort of intuitively following the direction of the evidence.
Yeah.
And we don't always make all the steps explicit. It's just true we don't. And there's very much going on under the surface, as we all know. You know, like if you come home and it just seems to you that your wife is home already. Sometimes that just happens before you account for any of those reasons rationally. Like maybe
you didn't do some like explicit Bayesian analysis, right? When you
exactly. And now in the end, you usually can recount some of your reasons, though, right? You're like, oh, I guess I did see the keys on the key hook and her purse is over on the piano, or maybe there was a certain smell of perfume or whatever it was. You can usually start to uncover some of the reasons. And if you couldn't after a while, I think you should probably abandon your belief. You'd be like, oh, that was a weird stray hunch. And so I don't think we need to say on an evidentialist paradigm that like you have to be able to make all your reasons explicit. And Newman's just really good about this. The fact is we have to have the reasons and be somewhat aware, but it's not a matter of like being able to prove it to others, to marshal our reasons in a convincing deductive syllogism or something like that. I don't know. Does that help at all?
No, it's super helpful, and it seems like super reasonable as well. I mean, what are the alternatives, right? I mean, I guess you could just go externalist and bite the bullet on the issue that you think is significant, which I agree with. Or you can try and what? I mean, try and meet that extreme evidentialist bar, which nobody seems to be able to meet, right? Or just like succumb to the abyss of skepticism, right? I mean, like, is there another option out there? It's not immediately coming to mind, right?
No, that's basically it. The other thing I was going to say is sometimes people are confused because they think that if there's any sort of external standard on knowledge, then that makes you an externalist. But both internalists and externalists agree that there's lots of external conditions on knowledge. So truth itself isn't up to us. It's an external condition.
Yeah, like what's going on outside of me, right? For sure. Yeah.
And whatever the Gettier condition is, it's going to be a kind of external condition on knowledge where somehow the knowledge was caused in the right sort of way. But what internalists are denying is that all those external things are sufficient for knowledge. There's got to be some sort of, reasonability requirement, some sort of internal awareness.
Right. So it's not all as long as it's not all extrinsic and sufficient. Then you're an internalist, right?
And another way to see exactly. Which to me it kind of indicates, by the way, like externalism is a pretty extreme like sort of view. I mean, it's saying there's no internal requirement at all on knowledge. Which pretty intuitively there is, because we expect people to give reasons for their beliefs and stuff all the time.
Tell me why you think that, right?
I mean, that's just the most common question you could ask somebody when they say something. Another way to see the difference is to think about what epistemologists often call the new evil demon experiment, where we're sort of thinking about maybe two people, maybe like Bob and Sob, where Bob is in the real material world, and let's just say, Sob is being in some sort of demon deceived world. But they're having all the same internal experiences. People like me want to say that both Bob and Sob, like if one of them is justified in their beliefs and reasonable, then the other one is too. Now, only one of them has knowledge. Like Sob doesn't have any knowledge because he's having an experience as though he has
what he thinks is not really the same as what is, right?
But people like me think Sob could manifest all kinds of epistemic excellences. He could believe according to the experience he's received. It's not his fault he's deceived. And, he could manifest good judgment with the evidence he receives. He could believe in proportion to the evidence that he receives. Now, he's never going to have knowledge, but he could still be manifesting all kinds of excellence. But I think that in those cases, they have the same evidence.
Sure.
My sense was from a recent interview you had with Gavin that he was building sort of external stuff, like say the demon,
Yeah.
into the content of the experience itself, and that's something that I don't want to do at all.
Yeah.
I think the two people are receiving the same information. They're having the same mental goings on, even though they're caused by different external things.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I see the difference. Yeah, he's given a sort of Thomistic cognitional theory and a metaphysic of mind world, really, which you said that's what Thomas are sort of interested in, right?
Yeah.
Whereas again, we're kind of looking at the conditions of knowledge and justification and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I think it'd be fruitful to see more conversation between these parties. I do. I don't see like a lot of people doing both of these a whole heck of a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
I'm not going to do it. That's an invitation for somebody else, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. So it seems to me that in this sort of case, we get this idea that there's some sort of excellence to just believing well according to your evidence. And to me, it seems like a condition on knowledge, that we be responsive in a proper way to your evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, So there's different ways externalists have taken that sort of thought experiment too. But it seems to me that that what we ought to learn for it is like, well, part of what I think too is if I'm believing excellently, then I think this other guy is believing excellently too, who's totally deceived. I think we're justified to the same degree because I think we're receiving the same information. And let's just say we're both responding the same way. It seems to me we're either both justified or both unjustified. But the people taking this externalist perspective are always kind of taking this third person perspective that poor Saab doesn't have.
Yes,
and it's like we're judging him according to like a God's eye point of view, instead of like actually based on the information you have.
That sounds exactly right. That sounds exactly.
It just doesn't seem, which seems totally unfair to me. It'd be like berating a 5-year-old for believing in Santa Claus just because the rest of us can see that belief is crazy.
Yeah,
it's like, no, that's heartless, right? I mean, the poor 5-year-old, only has this information. Everyone they know has been lying to them and deceiving them and talking about Santa landing on the roof. Of course they should believe in Santa. I mean, that's right. So all of us believe in actually 3, I think, external conditions on knowledge. What we're disagreeing with is whether or not there's any internal requirement at all.
And you say yes, there is. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Good. Yeah, good. Excellent. Okay. If you don't mind, let's take a little bit of a turn now into natural theology. I know you've done some work here. How does all this stuff connect up for you? What are your general thoughts on just methodology and natural theology these days? Just curious to just pick your brain about some of that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my own approach, again, since I'm sort of just a moderate evidentialist, my own approach has been not to just look for one killer argument, but to let 1,000 flowers bloom and think about how they accumulate, right? Yeah. I mean, what gives me confidence I guess if I felt like I only have one killer argument, I'd be really nervous. Like that's my own disposition, partly kind of methodologically, I worry about putting all our eggs in one basket.
Yeah, totally.
I'm really glad that I don't think we have to do formal Bayesian calculus, though I think that helps us sort of see things at a certain level that could be helpful.
Right.
But I don't think that's required. Now, I think ordinary people are justified apart from knowing too many of these arguments, right? Like I think the average person in the pew is justified in believing in God because they've seen certain answers to prayer. They've felt God at certain moments in their life. They've observed the lives of maybe the saints or those that they've known who have or haven't.
So this is important. I want to flag this because you praised proper functionalism because it has a good thing that the average person in the pew can appeal to say, hey, I'm not irrational for this belief stuff, but your account can help them too, right? That's what you're saying, right? Yeah.
That's exactly what I think. I don't think we have to go with this proper functionalist story in order to account for how ordinary people are reasonable in their beliefs. I mean, they look around the world. Maybe they don't know design arguments or whatever, but like the world seems highly designed and intelligible and kind of orderly and beautiful beyond what it sort of needs to be in any way. They felt God in prayer. They have like 1,000 reasons to think that God exists. And I think it's very inhumane to like come along and be like, well, if you can't marshal this into a syllogism, you're not rational or something. That's way too high of a standard. That's way too high of a standard for anything. I mean, ordinary people can't justify then their belief in the material world. They don't know,
totally
they don't know anti-skeptical arguments against, idealism or whatever. So it seems to me that that's way too high of a standard. Ordinary people, then, if we have a normal standard, ordinary people can meet it. But the nice thing is too, if that was all we had, I guess kind of my disposition, and probably yours too, as more intellectual people, like it would also make me nervous if everything sort of just rested at that level and we couldn't go any deeper.
Of course.
And so I'm really glad that there's reasons from, that we have cosmological arguments, that we have ontological arguments, that we have moral arguments, that we have aesthetic arguments, that we have, arguments from consciousness and from rationality. And I'm so glad that we had this whole pantheon of arguments. And to me, I think each one of them gives some strong indication of God's existence to different degrees. But to me, it's that cumulative weight of them that, really, really makes me super confident in theism, So that's my own approach, is to bring them together and find kind of strength in the reinforcement.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm definitely sympathetic to that. Building the rope, right? Now, do you think your position in epistemology, do you think it can fit with a naturalism, right? And this isn't to say, because obviously a lot of us, can and do form beliefs and give accounts of those beliefs. And I think we would say we have knowledge entirely apart from thinking about the existence of God, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, we want an account of that account, right? We want an account of a nature or essentialist-based epistemology. We want to see what, if anything, can hold the whole thing up, or if it even needs to be held up at all. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, good. So the major proponent of phenomenal conservatism, right, Michael Huemer, is a naturalist.
Yeah, he's not a theist, right?
But although I will say, I find, every time he mentions anything related to God or religion, I lose my mind, because it's like he abandons all his epistemic principles. He just somehow thinks religious belief is just automatically irrational. It's like he's never really thought through how these principles apply to religious belief. And he hasn't responded to those of us who've argued that this fits very nicely together. But yeah, I think so. I don't think there's any direct conflict, because I actually just think we're all built to follow our reasons and argue about reasons. And so I think evidentialism is just the way we're all built. And I don't think there's any conflict on the kind of the first order. Like you said, though, we would want an account of why is any of this epistemic normativity in our world at all? Where does any of this come from? And it's there where I'm going to be super unsatisfied with, say, Huemer's sort of meta epistemology or sort of grounding.
Yeah, he's a weird sort of naturalist, though, right? Because he's like a substance dualist. So I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Until a naturalist like that gives me all their exotic commitments, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what's in that soup. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's a confused soup. To me, a naturalism would generally, I guess there could be two things that motivate naturalism, right? The one more common motivation is a scientism, right? And not a crude scientism, but a genuine commitment to the idea hey, we can explain everything that needs to be explained through some combination of atomic and evolutionary theory, right? So it's a really neat and tidy and clean and mathematical epistemological project. Maybe we have to wait for the idealized completed physics to have it all, but it's not going to make any reference to God, whatever. Okay. So then you're a reductivist, you're a mechanist, and then where the normativity stuff fits in there is beyond me. I don't think it fits, right? I think you got to be an eliminativist or an anti-realist at some point, right? So if you're that kind of naturalist, the inner logic of naturalism does not seem compatible with all the stuff that we're saying. And I think that's a good reason to not be that kind of naturalist.
Yeah.
Then there's these other form, I call them exotic, they're the naturalism that it's groovy naturalism, right? And I don't, what motivates this? Well, because now you're positing, if you're a naturalist and a substance dualist, clearly you're not committed to that scientism, right? Like for sure. So like, what is it then? Is it just like the problem of evil? Like you just think the problem of evil is just like or like some other like, but like when I talk to naturalists of this sort, like that doesn't seem like, like it's they haven't started thinking about the problem of evil till much later, right? They were this kind of or something, you know what I mean? It's like, what else is, it just ends up seeming like a hugely contrived thing to me that like has given up the original motivation for why one would be a naturalist in the first place. Like you're a naturalist, but like you've got Plato's heaven there and you're a substance dualist. So like, yeah, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Aside from like trying to show you that this does not hang together, it seems massively contrived and all this or that. So I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe you have some better thoughts on this than I do. It confuses me.
No. I feel the exact same way, where all the good naturalists, it seemed to me, have gotten to the point where they have a very, as you said, exotic sort of naturalism, where there's all these like immaterial entities and abstract objects and whatever that are all just.
They might even have a god, like they might even have a demiurge floating around in there, like moving the forms into, various patterns of exemplification.
Yeah, and to me, it's so unsatisfying for the reason that you hit on too, which is something like there's like no unity to this. It's like it's never brought all the way to its ultimate grounding, and it just feels like a host of exotic, like brute commitments. That feels very like ornate to me, without any real unity. And I would feel nervous if I was in their shoes, positing so many things like weird entities as brute, and so what else I want to say about that? I feel the same thing, and it parallels the discussion here in epistemology parallels the discussion in ethics too.
Yeah.
Right. Where you get to this point where the only real, I mean, I have some appreciation that these guys are not these hardcore reductive materialists. But like you said, I'm actually kind of attracted to hardcore reductive materialism because it's such a simple, unified, like beautiful. If it could do all the work,
it's
like
clean.
It's clean. It is. That's where I would be. There's a Quine that said some people are attracted to desert landscapes, and it's a fundamental commitment. It's like, that's the way I feel. That would be so clean and tidy. But I just don't think that holds any water. Partly for all the reasons that these guys are pointing out, that reality is just more complicated. And but then they end up with all these weird sort of Platonic ornate commitments. And just like really the best account, right? The best non-God account is something like Wielenberg's account of morality, but it ends up just being a kind of Platonism where there just are these eternal abstract truths about morality that like happen to supervene,
like brutally supervene on certain physical states of affairs. Yeah, very interesting.
Like, okay. And it's like those are all brute or primitive or unexplained connections or something. And similarly, in epistemology here, again, naturalists have just had a hard time with epistemic normativity too, because it's a weird feature if you're not a theist. But of course, these guys are smart enough to see we can't get rid of epistemic. So I don't know which one is dumber. I mean, the person who literally decides, well, I can't make sense of epistemic normativity or moral normativity in my worldview, so I'm just going to jettison them, even though it's some of the most obvious things that we know.
Yep.
Or the person who's like, well, I'll just kind of create a little epicycle on my naturalism and say, I'm going to keep epistemic normativity, but it's just going to be this ungrounded thing floating around, like some brute truth about our world that has no further explanation.
I find them both deeply, deeply, unsatisfactory.
I do too.
At least.
I do too. Yeah. I'm 100% with you.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. So, and it's funny because like I'm obviously sympathetic to a lot of the commitments that I share a lot of those commitments, right? I just think that to have those commitments, you need some further ultimate ground, right? You say it's not. It's a unifying explanation, and ultimately, again, this comes to the brute fact thing. I think you got to try and get rid of brute facts if you can. Like, I'm definitely in the camp that like let's get those down to zero.
Yep.
Like I think we have to. And I think there has to be a very special sort of theoretical entity for that to make sense. And the only thing that seems to me the right sort of theoretical entity that could get brute facts down to zero would be something that is unrestrictedly completely intelligible, right? And this is like the classical traditional understanding of God, the unrestricted, as Bernard Lonergan, the unrestricted act of understanding itself, right? And it's a perfect being is another kind of way to think about it. Although I think perfection rides atop the deeper commitments of like pure actuality and subsistent being. Like this seems the only thing, to put it simply, that would be relevantly different enough as a sort of theoretical entity that could bring the explanatory project to a principled termination
Totally.
point. That's how I think about it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that's exactly right. There's something I wanted to add to what you were saying, but no, I think we have very similar ideas. But I mean, what's the other option? I mean, like when I hear Oppie and these guys talk, it's like they kind of all agree that there needs to be something necessary, but they're like, why can't it be the initial conditions of the universe or something? And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? I'm just so confused by it, because it just so obviously seems like not the kind of entity that would bring this to a kind of unity that would be self-explanatory, and therefore doesn't stand in need of another cause of some kind, you know?
I'm with you, right? It just seems like there's just certain categories or types of things that seem like they wouldn't be the right sort of thing that could in principle answer every sort of question about itself from the principles internal to itself, right? And when classical theists posit God, we're not saying like, oh, well, God's essence is this and this. No, we're just saying like there has to be an essence like that if we're going to bring question, like if we're going to be able to give an adequate answer to every coherent question that can be asked, right? That's the idea, right? And if you think that some like even necessary, like we explain necessary truths all the time in ethics, right? We go to deeper axioms in mathematics. So like just because something's necessary doesn't mean that that's where we stop, right?
I totally agree.
And like even Aquinas, how like no, there's a lot of even necessary like contingent realities, which sounds like a contradiction, but he meant it's contingent as in it's ontologically dependent, but it's necessary insofar as like it has, like you can't destroy it, right? It has to exist. So all right, sorry. Preaching to the choir here, but I think that's a pretty important point, right?
It is, it's a really important point, because I mean, people are confused on this all the time. I run into people all the time. Philosophers are like, well, that's necessary, so it doesn't need an explanation. It's like they haven't really thought it through, that some necessities still don't sort of have their explanation through themselves, right? They need some sort of further account, as to. It's like, so just calling it a necessary moral truth doesn't really mean it's self-explanatory. It means it couldn't have been otherwise, but doesn't mean it's self-explanatory as to why in the world is that a necessary truth.
Yes. Right. Yeah. And like, I think, so like, why does a triangle have three sides? Well, that's kind of confused when you understand what a triangle is, or why does a mountain have valleys? Those are right. But why is there a world with any essences at all? Well, that's an interesting question.
Exactly.
Right.
And you might think if there's a world, there's going to be these necessary essences, but you still, you still have to ask, why is there a world with these things at all?
Yeah. So I think that's good. Okay, awesome. So, all right, this has been a fascinating conversation. Any final summary thoughts on everything that we've discussed so far? This has been great.
No, this is great. I was laughing with one of your interviews with Gavin, where you said all the cool kids are into Reformed epistemology. And I'm like, oh man, I know what's going on. This isn't the right theory.
No, after I just had to say that's not, I'm not even in well, we were joking before the podcast. We've had our cards revoked because we don't always hold the right ideas
party line
on certain things. Like if you're a Thomist who's sympathetic to certain design arguments or whatever, then you get in trouble. Which would be fun for another conversation in the future. So before we go, let people know about some of your works, stuff you've already put out that they can check out. Anything you're working on in the future that you want to mention or tease, please. Let us know.
Great. Thanks for that. You can find all my philosophical work at philpapers.org. Just look for Logan Gage there. And I've been writing on Newman the last several years. I have a number of articles there on that. Further defense of PhenomenalConservatism and its application to religious belief that Blake McAllister and I have written, I think is one of my favorite pieces. And then I'm working now with Fred Aquino of Southern Methodist University, who's an expert on Newman. And we're writing a short book for Cambridge University Press on Newman and the rationality of religious belief, where we're hoping to tie together several of these thoughts about common sense epistemology, the starting place in trusting in sort of trust, and that illative sense. Sort of tie this together for people, and so they get a pretty good little picture of Newman's overall epistemology, and then how that's supposed to apply to religious beliefs in particular.
Yeah, excellent. Dr. Logan Paul Gage, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you.